just a few questions. So first of all, so how were people selected to go to Auschwitz, this concentration camp?
First of all, First of all, concentration camp Auschwitz was created in 1940. The purpose of creating the camp was to create a camp for the Polish political prisoners. So Auschwitz wasn't a death camp and killing site for the European Jews from the beginning. Initially, the camp was for the Poles, for the political prisoners. During the war, it has become the largest killing site for the European Jews. So the first prisoners brought to Auschwitz were Polish prisoners. From 1941, there were also Soviet POWs deported. There were also Roma people, Gypsies brought here. And in 1942, spring, the deportations of the Jews started. So Auschwitz had two different functions during the war. It was set up as a concentration camp, and then during the war, it also has become the killing site for the European Jews. And there were people brought here from different parts of Europe, even from Norway or from Greece. So this journey to Auschwitz could take, for example, a couple of days or even more than a week.
So just asking about the journey, how were people transported to Auschwitz and concentration camps mainly?
Most of those people that were deported to Auschwitz came here by trains in the train carts. Germans using the existing railway system during the war, and basically they occupied most of the Europe, could much easier organize those deportations and transports to the camp using the railway system and the train carts in which people were brought to Auschwitz. One of the train carts typical for those carts used during the war by the Germans, you can see on the platform in Auschwitz to Birkenau camp.
Um, so I guess like going into detail a bit more, what would someone in this camp specifically do in like just the daily life?
Of course, it depends about which year we are talking about, because the camp was created in 1940, but there was still a lot of like construction works to be done, because most of these buildings in Auschwitz one existed before the war, but still in some they had to add the second floor. 8 of these barracks in Auschwitz one were built from scratch. So doing construction works and then maintaining the camp, of course, people were made to work here. Uh, there were also many of those prisoners that were forced to be like slave laborers for the companies that paid for that, and they were used in the factories, in the workshops. They worked on the farms, fields. So there were different. It's something. It depends on the skills and knowledge that people had.
So, because at least at the start of the war, mostly it was a labor camp. What were the prisoners here kind of forced to do or make?
Uh, Different things. I mean, there were just sometimes things that were done for the camp, like furniture or other such things. But of course, later there were companies that paid for the workers, for the slave labor, and they were producing parts of planes, ammunition, and other such things. Many things that were used for military purposes.
So just I guess the question is, why were these striped uniform chosen for people to wear at concentration camps?
Um, Wearing such uniforms, in case of somebody escape, for example, for those people, it wasn't that easy to hide, to keep it secret that they are from the camps, because they had those uniforms, so they could be easily found, easily visible by the others. So in this way, wearing the stripes, Germans also try to make sure that if somebody will escape from the camp, the others will just see that he's one of the prisoners from the concentration camps.
So if we look at like escaping, were there any attempted escapes from Auschwitz during the war?
As far as we know, there were at least 900 people that tried to escape from the Auschwitz complex. So not just from Auschwitz 1, from Auschwitz 2, 3, and there were also many subcamps. So at least 900 tried, but only about 200 people succeed. And of course, many of those escapes were the escapes from the workplaces that were outside the camp because it was already much easier. We still have to remember that around Auschwitz 1 and 2, there was this special zone of interest, buffer zone, that was controlled by the Germans. It was about 40 square kilometers. So basically, they had to somehow leave the buffer zone and then maybe ask for help from the civilians. Uh, the most famous escape probably that took place during the war was the escape that took place in June 1942, when 4 Polish prisoners wearing German uniforms that they stole from the SS warehouses, and then they stole a car. They left Auschwitz. They escaped by car from the camp, and they succeed.
Okay. So a new question. Um, about the commandant of the camp. Do you know why he, of all the other commandants, were selected for this camp?
So when it comes to the members of the SS staff, there were over 8,000 members of the staff that were in this camp during the war. Up to now, only about 10% of them were prosecuted and were brought to justice. And there were members of the SS. So it means that they were not just regular soldiers. This wasn't Wehrmacht, like the army. They were members of the SS, special trained also to work in the concentration camp, in the concentration camps. So it wasn't like they're that always they were like just given orders. They were it was even sort of their will to do this job and follow the ideology of the Nazis.
Okay. So if we, I guess, zoom out slightly, just a question. For example, the Allies, in this war knew, um, at least that the Jews were being kind of forced to work and killed in these camps. So my question would be, why did they not do more about it?
Um, so I think that there is a still discussion that is taking place about what the Allies could do and they didn't. However, it's true that they knew about the concentration camps and places like Auschwitz. In 1944, the camp was even bombed, but you have to remember that there was no such plans to bomb Auschwitz 1 or 2, in which they had gas chambers, crematoria. The plan was to bomb the factory Auschwitz 3 Monowitz that was producing, for example, petrol for the military purposes. Uh, the Allies knew about the camps. The Polish government that was in London in exile during the war also knew about it. They wrote about it. There's a whole book called London Has Been Informed. They wrote a report about it, and they were basically all told, but there was nothing done to stop it. I mean, that was in 1944 was also the year when the Allies knew that the Germans were losing the war. I mean, Germans knew that, and but still, at the same time, there were thousands of Jews being brought here and sent to the gas chambers and murdered. So at the same time, when the Germans were losing the war already, they were still killing thousands of people here. Allies basically did nothing to stop it.
Uh, So what would you say are like key lessons that we need to learn? Everyone needs to learn from what happened during the Holocaust.
I'm sure that Auschwitz, it's a lesson that everyone should take. But it it's also a huge responsibility for what we want to know about it and how we want to pass this knowledge to the others. Many survivors said it happened, therefore it can happen again. The history likes to be repeated. After the war, after the Second World War, there were many other wars. There were genocides, killings, Balkans, Rwanda, Darfur, Cambodia, many other such places. What we should do is not just to like come here as visitors, learn about it, but also maybe start thinking what we can do for the others that, for example, cannot be here in person, that we can pass this story to the others, tell them that what happened. Forgetting that this happened, it's even worse that denying that this happened, in my opinion, at least.
So, what would you say would be a good way for all of us to remember this period so that it doesn't, so that we can kind of try to make sure it doesn't ever happen again?
I think that, first of all, if you want to start doing something, you should be here in person. You should come to this place because our aim, the aim of the museum, is to preserve the authenticity of the site. We want people to go through the authentic site, to be something they can feel almost like in the footsteps of those that we have. I mean, you're standing in the same place in which you were conducting selections. You're in the barracks in which people were kept, in which they were dying. You see the remains of the gas chambers. You go to the gas chamber, which is in Auschwitz 1, the only one that still exists. But it's still something very, very individual thing. I mean, people come here for different reasons. People come here to learn. People come here to show their respect to the victims. People come here because they lost their relatives in Auschwitz and they want to come here and pay tribute to those that perished here. What we can do to make sure that this will never happen, first of all, education. Second, preservation of the site. Two pillars on which you can start working with others and trying to make sure that this will be never forgotten and this will never happen again. But it depends on us. It's always a very individual thing, but I think we all need to make sure that such things on such a scale will never repeat again.
Thank you.